everyone, it's me. If you're new here, hi, my name is Alanna and I'm a Canadian, but I live here in the UK. And if you're not new here, hey, how's it going? It is black outside. The clouds are scary. We are about to get a thunderstorm. I did not time this properly. Recently I did a video about British hobbies and a lot of people said reading, they love to read, and guess what? Me too. So I would like to share some of the best British books I've read recently. They're not necessarily new British books, but they're new to me. And what's really interesting is even though all of these books are written by British people, they are all so shockingly different from each other. So grab a seat, get cozy. I had the last bit of cold brew from this morning. I also realized my hair is drying. It's not greasy, okay? It is drying. So please disregard that. So where should we start off first? I know. I would like to start off with one of the books that I found the most surprising, and that is Bob Mortimer's The Satsuma Complex. Can you guys see that? Is that too reflective? Also, I got a Kindle this year, so some of these books are on the Kindle, largely because I've run out of room to house books. We have a stack on the floor back there because they don't fit anywhere. I've heard people talk about Bob Mortimer's books. He's got a couple now, and for some reason in my mind, I pictured that they would be like autobiographies in some way. I had no idea that this was gonna be like a real fiction book, and I loved it. If you didn't know who Bob Mortimer is and you just picked up this book and read it, I honestly don't think that you would be able to tell it was written by a comedian and not like just a traditional author. I was really shocked at how good this was. And I know maybe that sounds like a bit mean, but it really just read like a great fiction author. Now, if you do know Bob and you know Bob going into reading this, I definitely read it in his voice. Like I could hear his cadence and his voice throughout the book. This was just a fabulous read. It's quite dark. Like the subject matter is quite dark, but it's also just like, I guess I was gonna say shockingly funny, but it shouldn't be shocking. It's very, very funny. Now, I don't know about you, but I go into books totally blind. So I do not read the back cover of any book that I read. If someone recommends a book to me, or I see maybe online that it's got good reviews, or it's like a really popular book right now, that's all that I need, and I'll just read it. I don't read anything about it. I don't read the blurb. I don't read the back. I love going into a book knowing absolutely nothing. So all of these British book reviews, there's going to be no spoilers. I'm just going to give you like the essence of what I thought, just like the vibes. But the Satsuma Complex, really, really enjoyable, and I was really quite surprised how well written and I loved it. That all sounds like really mean. Like I'm so surprised how well written. I had a great time. For our next British book, this is actually the first one I've read of this classic British author. And I actually have the hard copy. And it is my very first Agatha Christie, and Then There Were None. I had never read Agatha Christie before. I don't know why, I just never did. And I think part of me thought that because the books are so old, they must be quite dated. And I have to say that is not true. For a book that was published like over 80 years ago, I couldn't tell. Like obviously there is an element of age to it. It's set in a different time period, but I couldn't tell that it was written that long ago. Does that make sense? I was constantly guessing throughout who done it, and I was wrong every single time. It was really fun. I would absolutely read more Agatha Christie. It's accessible, it's thrilling, it's gripping. There's a reason she's like the queen of a murder mystery, and I totally get it now. I also took my mom to see The Mousetrap. That's another Agatha Christie. I think it was called something originally, and they've sort of adapted it for the play, for the stage, whatever. I saw that with my mom. That was super fun, and again, you're guessing throughout, and we were both wrong. It was just super fun, both of those, the play and this book. Agatha Christie, you won't guess it, which I think is just like really impressive. And they also both felt so completely British. I tend to get through a decent amount of books, and of course these are not all of the books I've read this year. I've read a lot of non-British authors as well, but I tend to get through the books because I designate a reading time, and that is right before bed. I have always had problems falling asleep. I don't know if you were the same. I could lay there for hours and it's truly horrible. So I read before bed because I find it helps me to fall asleep, but also it keeps me off of my phone, which never helps me fall asleep. But even still, I tend to wake up in the night until today's sponsor, yes, Loop earplugs. My partner has always been a huge believer in wearing earplugs to sleep, which I just have avoided. It just seems like it'd be really uncomfortable and annoying, but then I wake up throughout the night. The joy of painfully thin windows. But lately I've been sleeping with my Loop Dream earplugs, and I gotta say, I am surprised how well it works. Loop Dream has 27 decibel noise reduction, plus you get 4 different ear tip sizes, so you can get the right size for your individual ears, and they're comfortable. I've also been experimenting with the Loop Switch 2 while I work during the day. These are a 3-in-1 earplug where you can toggle between 3 different modes: quiet for more noise reduction, experience for sound and speech, and engage to filter noise but not conversations. I have never seen an earplug that lets you switch between modes before. Loop earplugs also come in a bunch of really fun colors. So for my Switch 2, I went with silver, and then for my Loop Dream earplugs, I went with lilac. If you want to give it a go, make sure to use my code LOOPX-Alanna. You're gonna get 20% off, and make sure you use my link in the description. Next up is another Kindle book, and this is totally different from the last two. Again, they're all very unique, but this one is probably one of the most unique plots I've ever read. And that is Susanna Clarke's Piranesi. I literally just YouTubed how to pronounce that, and I've already forgotten. This was recommended to me by a friend, and if you were ever going to read a book the way that I do, like not reading the back cover, not reading the description, if you were ever going to do it, this is the book to do it for. Piranesi. This was so unique. It's one of those books where it drops you right into it. You are not told anything. You have to figure it out yourself, and I absolutely loved it. It is so beautifully written. It is so interesting and unique. It's weird. Some people are like, oh, I don't like it. It was bizarre. I loved it. I love the bizarre. I kind of look at books in 2 ways. Well, 3 ways, I guess. There's bad books, books that I don't like, books that I don't finish, and then there are good books. Within the good books side, there's 2 categories. One is like enjoyable, fun. Maybe it wasn't like written that well, or it's a bit silly, but I enjoyed reading it. I had fun reading it. I had fun. Enjoyable, fun. How many times can I say enjoyable and fun? One more time. They're enjoyable and they're fun. But also in this good category are the books that are memorable. They're like impactful. They're like, oh my God, I think about them for so long after. They feel like monumental. And not all books need to be memorable. Some just need to be fun, right? It depends what you read for. Because I read such a variety and so many genres, all the genres. I'll read all the genres. I'll read a book without knowing what it's about. I get a lot of sort of, some are just fun, and that's fine. But I would say Piranesi, I think it's Piranesi, or close enough. This to me was a memorable book. It really just shocked me, and I couldn't stop thinking about it, and I'm like recommending it to everybody. It was just so unlike anything that I had read before. If you've ever read House of Leaves, that was another really memorable book for me in high school. That's like the only thing I can compare it to. It is bizarre and it is unique, and I just loved it. I was so shocked. I read this when I was on holiday in Greece, and I couldn't stop reading it. I couldn't stop thinking about it afterwards. I was telling everybody about it. I just really, really enjoyed it. And not to say that this book will be a memorable book for you. Maybe it'll just be fun. Maybe you'll hate it, who knows? That's the fun and the surprise. Now, our next book series won't fit on my bookshelf, won't fit on those bookshelves. It is on the pile. So let's go dig it out. I think if we're gonna talk about British books, we have to talk about these ones. So this, of course, is the Thursday Murder Club series by Richard Osman. I'm pretty sure we just have 4, knock on wood, and I loved them. In particular, the first one, I almost cried when I read this. I think it's safe to say the British love a murder mystery, right? All the way from Agatha Christie now to Richard Osman. But this was not only funny, but it was also like really moving. I was surprised. I wasn't expecting it. I didn't know what I was expecting, to be fair, but there's a lot in here about grief, about loneliness, about dying, and this really shook me. I also thought, as a foreigner, so I live in Kent, and to read a book that mentions like Kentish things and also, of course, very British things, I really enjoyed it. I don't know how else to say. I really enjoyed this, and I almost cried. So naturally, of course, I went on to read all of the other ones. I will say there's nothing new in these. Like, they're basically the same thing over and over again. But it obviously works, so it makes sense. It's just, it kind of becomes a bit samey, if that makes sense. Does anything I say make sense? So in my humble opinion, read one and then read something else, and then read the other one and read something else, and then read another one and read something else in between to kind of break it up. Because otherwise, yeah, it does just sound like one big book. But I am really excited for the movie. And I definitely would read more Richard Osman. I know he's kind of branched off into like another, I don't know if it's series, but other stuff. And last thing on these books, I promise. Sometimes when I read books, especially where I read, like, I don't know what I'm about to read. I don't always know the author. I don't know their nationality. I don't really care, to be fair. I'm just reading to read, right? And a lot of times I can't tell if the author is British or the author is American or Canadian. You know, it's just, I'm just reading a good story, hopefully. These are so obviously British in a really fun, interesting, heartwarming kind of way. Anyway, we simply have to move on. Otherwise, this video is going to be too long. It's probably too long as it is. I could talk about books all day. Now, our next British book is another famous historic British author I had never read before. Can you guess who it is? You've got a lot of them, so I'd be shocked if you can't guess. It is Jane Austen. Yeah, I'd never read a Jane Austen book, but I did this year, and I read Pride and Prejudice. Pride and Prejudice. Sometimes what I find where I switch between all different genres and different authors, different writing styles, sometimes it's hard to get into a book at the beginning because the language can be so different. So going from a modern author like Richard Osman to a Jane Austen novel, it takes some time to get into the flow of it. But once I did, this was really fun. It didn't blow me out of the water, and maybe that's because this book has been talked about for years, more than years, a long time. I can imagine at the time it was released, it was probably quite exceptional. It was quite shocking. Of course, reading it in 2025, you have to kind of look at it with a different lens, but it's fun, it's cute, it was enjoyable. It was quite quick once I got into the language. I then went and watched the 2005 movie, which I had never seen before either. I am not a Jane Austen girly. This was all new to me. But I immediately watched the movie after I finished the book. I will say there's way more like tension in the movie than there is in the book. And a lot of the really famous lines in the movie do not happen in the book. So it's kind of a case of they took, you know, the historical original material and they've elevated it for a movie that has a bit more tension, a bit more, you know, dramatic stuff. And I did prefer the movie to the book, but the book is still good. Now, going from Jane Austen's historical romance, we are jumping into British spies. And can I say, the Brits do spies like nobody else. This is one of the best spy books I have ever read, and that is Slow Horses by Mick Herron. This is fabulous. There's actually quite a lot of characters in this, and they are so beautifully crafted that they all feel very real, which you don't always get that in books. And I think every single character in this ensemble could have their own book. They're that fleshed out. They're that real. I was constantly surprised by this. I had no idea where it was going. I was just enthralled. It is thrilling, it's exciting, it's British, very, very British. Incredible. I then went on to watch the show. So the first book is the first season of the show. Gary Oldman, absolutely incredible. I loved it so much that unfortunately I then binged the rest of the TV show, which I kind of regret because now if I go back and read the rest of the books, they're kind of spoiled, but honestly I might do them anyways. The show was fabulous. The first book, fabulous. If you like spies, you have to read it. Like if you're not gonna read it, please watch the show. I messaged my mom and I was like, you gotta watch Slow Horses. And then like 2 days later, she texted me back and being like, yeah, I watched the whole thing, all the seasons. It is very, very good. And the book is just beautifully crafted. Next up, I would like to talk about Rivers in the Sky by Elif Shafak. Probably didn't pronounce that right, and I am deeply sorry. This is a story where it's told through multiple different characters across time, and you're like, how could these possibly connect? But they do. This is genuinely beautifully written. The language is absolutely beautiful. I did get a little bit bored, maybe like 70% of the way through. I was like, all right, let's get going, you know, let's make it happen. But it is really beautiful. And one thing that was really cool, so as a Canadian living in England, there's a lot that goes on with that, of course, but something that is really fun and interesting is when you watch movies or TV or you read books and they talk about places in the UK that I am now familiar with. So for instance, in this book, it talks about these statues being brought to the British Museum. And I actually have a video on my channel at the British Museum, and we view this exhibit that they talk about. And that is something that is just so special, and I wouldn't have that connection had I not moved to the UK, you know, lived here and stuff. It's very cool. And there's lots of moments like that in all of these books that are set in the UK, and it talks about something, you know, like a place that I've been to. Whether that's local places in the Thursday Murder Club or Slow Horses talks about places in London. It's like I can picture those places. I've been there. I have a connection to it, which is really cool. But anyway, this book is beautiful, very interesting, very multi-layered. There's a lot of stuff going on. Did get a little bit slow for me personally, but very, very cool. And I love stories that have the different characters and the different timelines. I find that just adds another layer to it. Now this year had a lot of firsts for me with reading. I read my first ever Agatha Christie, I read my first ever Jane Austen, and I read my first ever H.G. Wells. Like I mentioned before about seeing connections to my life in the UK when I read these books, I had no idea he was born in Kent. How fun. I also didn't know that he married his first cousin, and then he separated from her when he fell in love with one of his students. Yikes. If we just disregard that, for my first ever H.G. Wells, I went with the Time Machine. Now this one was tricky to get into at the beginning. Some of them, it's just like a little bit harder depending on the language, you know, when I switch from genre to genre. This one took a little bit, but once it gets going, it does not stop. This was so interesting. Kind of like the Agatha Christie and the Jane Austen. It's quite old, and you think, well, reading this in 2025, you're probably not going to get a lot from it because so many other better books have done this particular trope, like time travel, but I loved this. This was so interesting. It was thrilling. It was scary. I was actually kind of scared at some parts, like imagining yourself in this situation and what would you do? I thought it was great. And after this whole experiment focusing on British authors, I would read all of these authors again. If they have other books, and a lot of them do, I would absolutely read them. They were all really interesting in their own unique way. From spies to murder mysteries, to romance, to time travel, sci-fi stuff, fabulous. All of them are so British and so different from each other. If you have a British book you think I should read, please leave a comment down below. Please give me your recommendations. That's how I choose my next book. It's really word of mouth. And I'll read just about anything. If you would like to watch something else right now, which honestly would really mean a lot to me, would love that for you. No worries if not. If you're busy, don't worry about it. But can I suggest this one, my video about British hobbies? But as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, bye!